Hello everyone, I'm here to talk about the book Portraits of the White Man, which you should have read by now. Linguistic Play and Cultural Symbols Among the Western Apache by Basso. This is an example of a linguistic ethnography. It's a classic. I use it in part because it's recognized as a classic. I think it's pretty easy to read. In one sense, it's a little bit dangerous because it's kind of easy to read it on one level and perhaps overlook the different levels that are part of it, and I hope to kind of bring those into focus for you today. And it's not too long, and goodness gracious, it's got cartoons, so what the heck, right? Hopefully, and not only that, it's an older book, so most of you can find it for pretty cheap, I hope. So let's talk about it a little bit. I'm just going to give you some basic discussion here, and then I hope that we'll have some discussion online about it as well. So just so you have an idea of who we're talking about, the Western Apache. Here you see they're located primarily in eastern Arizona, right up to and right just barely across the New Mexico border. They're one of 6 Apache groups. The first concept that I want to talk about here is this Buckskin Metaphor, and I'm just going to kind of throw these out, and you could talk about them in any which way you want. But the Buckskin Metaphor, the idea here is that the Western Apache believes that the white men, the outsiders who've come in, often run a very serious risk in the development of relationships because they act too quickly in bending those relationships in ways that they should bend when they're comfortable, but they do it before they are, and they run the risk of breaking that. So here the example is of a buckskin. I don't know if you've ever seen a deer skin after it's been taken off the animal, thrown over a fence for a couple of days, something like that. It becomes very stiff. It's stiff as a board. Almost impossible to move it, to bend it. In order to make this buckskin, you have to work this hard skin very slowly over time. It takes a lot of care. You got to be very careful. If you push too hard on it, you're going to crack it. You won't be able to repair it. And so here the Indians say that relationships are this way. You shouldn't joke with other people too quick. You shouldn't ask them about their personal life. You shouldn't get involved in their own dealings, because to do so runs the risk of fracturing that relationship. This is really interesting. And the white man here is sort of set off as doing this wrong all the time. And the reason is because for the white man, the joking, the teasing, the asking how you're doing, calling people friend, all of that is a way of establishing the relationships. That we say we have to soften these things up, and the way we soften them up is by asking other people, how are you doing? We tease with them, and after a while we kind of become comfortable with that, and then we have this soft relationship. So there is an inherent difference in the approach to relationships that's illuminated here. Now, from the perspective of the Western Apaches, the white men are kind of out there and rude and ignorant. But it goes both ways. They get treated the same way by the white man. The white man sees them as backwards and sort of standoffish and unwilling to associate even when they're given opportunities to, etc., etc. Okay, so the buckskin metaphor is really important. I want you to look at the principles for creating joking imitations. In fact, I would memorize these. Okay, 2, contrast principle, distortion principle. If you're going to do a joking imitation of the sort that Basso describes in this book, where the Indian man, primarily men, assume the role of a white person, and they take on various roles: school teacher, doctor, preacher, social worker, whatever, and they act like the white man. They put on a show like the white man. If you're going to do that, you have to do 2 things. You have to look for characteristics that are in contrast. So think about this. If you're female, take a minute, turn off the camera, go in the bathroom if you need to, whatever, look in the mirror and pretend like you're a male, and vice versa. So males, go pretend like you're a female. Come back, and what did you do? If you're a male, you probably highlighted some sort of walking features, right? You maybe did some little eye thing. You got to move your eyelashes a little bit, and your voice got high and squeaky. And if you're female, you probably said, "Dude, what's up?" And you put your hand in your pants, and you lean back on the couch. And okay, this is an example of contrast. You're looking for things that are similar. There are lots of things that are the same between men and women. So if you're going to do an imitation, it doesn't do you any good to pick those things that are the same. The same thing here with the joking imitations of the white men. So that's the first thing. You've got to look for things, areas of contrast. The second is that you have to distort. You have to make them extreme. So it's not just, hey, dude. It's, dude, what up? Oh, boy, we're going to go shopping, and then we're going to get our nails done, and then we're going to go have some fruit, and then we'll go puke later so that we can still fit into my pants. You know, we're going to exaggerate all of this stuff. So this is contrast and distortion. You have to distort that. You want to get the epitome of what the white man is. So you're drawing out. It's epitomization, means you're taking the essential elements, putting those on display. Okay, 2 more things I would memorize if I were you. These are the principles for interpreting the joking imitations. And you're going to see those on not the next slide, but the following one, and that is comparison and censure. So comparison and censure. If you're going to interpret this, you have to compare now. You've got this contrast, and you're going to compare, and you're going to say, where are the differences? Do I recognize differences between what this person's doing, acting like the white man, and what I'm supposed to be as an Apache? And then censure. What is it that this person is saying about these behaviors? Are they saying that the white man acts this way and that's not our way? It's not the way that the Indians behave. And so it says they don't understand, right? And what comes out at the end of the imitations, you hear the phrase, white men are stupid, right? And white men are stupid has a specific purpose. White men are stupid does 2 things. One, it shows that you've understood that this is a joking imitation, that you appreciated it, that the rhetorical style was appropriate, that it did what it was supposed to do. And it also says the joking frame is now removed. That's the end of it. So you're joking, you're teasing, you're acting like a white man, and now I say white men are stupid. That says that frame, I'm not going to interpret your behavior through that frame anymore. It keys, if you'll remember that term from our ethnography of speaking from Dale Himes, it keys, it sets a new tone of interpretation that says everything that happens from here on isn't in that joking frame. So if you keep acting like the white man, I'm going to assume that you're telling me that I have a problem with these things, or that you see these things as being appropriate. You've adopted the ways of the white man. Okay, there's a quote here a couple of slides back where I kind of jumped right after the epitomization. A quote from Basso where he says, what the Joker intends is that the model he constructs of the white man will be judged and appraised in terms of models that members of his audience have of themselves. Really important. If you're going to interpret the joking imitation of the white man, you do it based on your interpretation of yourself, because now you can see the contrast. Now you see the distortion. You see, do I fit into this? If I'm like that, then I'm being censured. I'm being told this isn't the way we behave. It's not our way. And that this operation will reveal that where versions of human guidedness are concerned, the Anglo-American version is not only different, but also seriously defective. This is a means of maintaining culture. It's a means of maintaining a cultural identity apart from the white man. By doing these joking imitations, Apaches remind each other who they are and who they're not, and what's appropriate for their people, not what's believed to be appropriate by another. Okay, take a look at the slide labeled Functional Differentiation. Speakers in multilingual communities do not randomly switch among the varieties available to them. We've talked about this a lot, that we have this repertoire of available resources. And when we switch from one to another, whether it's a dialect change, a register change, a language change, a tone of voice change, if we go from formal to foreigner talk, it's not random. We have all of these things available, and he says, rather they choose systematically among them and put them to specialized uses. Putting it to a specialized use means that you have a specific aim in mind. There's something you're trying to accomplish, and that's what's happening here. When these Apaches do these joking imitations, they do so for a specific purpose. The next slide deals with this as well. It's talking about specifically code switching, which is a term you should be familiar with already. So code switching is using 2 different language forms in one speech event. So it's a device for framing verbal messages. It's a fine-grained technique for identifying stretches of talk as particular kinds of doing things that are intended to accomplish particular kinds of work. So when the Apaches switch over to English and they do so in such and such a way, they use vocal intonation, etc., that reminds everyone of the white man. They're doing specific work. They're reminding everyone, this is not the way we behave. These people want us to do that. They tell us we should do this, but that's not us. We're different. Okay, I think this quote is one of my favorite in the text, in this book. And it's this idea that, well, Basso just says, I'm just going to read it. He says, "For you realize instantly that Anglo-Americans, though rarely present in Apache homes, are never really absent from them either." I think this is a really great insight, that the Anglo-Americans have such an impact that even though they're not in people's homes, they're constantly in the homes. Their influence, their effect, their consequences, the butting of heads between the two cultures is constantly there. It's something people are always aware of. And there's a fine line between accepting these ideas from outsiders and maintaining the ideas, the traditional values of the Apaches. And that those things come into play in expectations for what is normal. And different people have different expectations about what is acceptable. And you think about this, who is ever present in your life? My mom is always sort of present in my life. I always, kind of think, what would mom think about this? I hear mom's voice telling me things, So you can think of this in a lot of ways. I've had women in the class tell me, well, men are always present. If we get together and it's a girls' night out, what do we talk about? We talk about men. Or we talk about things that we think we should do to please men. So we talk about, I'm going to get my hair done this way, or I'm going to do this or that or the other thing. Men probably do the same thing in reverse. Although men, I don't know, men sort of are maybe a little more self-absorbed. I don't know. Anyway, here's an important concept: foregrounding. There's a story early in the book about a little girl who chastises this puppy. Remember, the puppy's name's Charles Bronson. He's an actor from the 70s and 80s. He was kind of a tough guy, kind of a Clint Eastwood type. And it says, language alternations have the ability to highlight non-present orders of reality. These orders of reality are primary worlds. So when this little girl gets mad at this dog because it bites her, she becomes the teacher and she makes the dog the student, which is ironically and not insignificantly the role that she normally plays. So she adopts a more powerful role, that of a white school teacher, and she starts telling this dog, you're going to be punished. You don't do this, you're going to be punished. Okay? So she brings in another primary world into a secondary context. Now her kitchen, where this takes place, becomes a classroom. So her experiences in one place are brought into play in another place. This is a secondary reality. It's a secondary world. And remember, the mom chastises her and says, hey, be careful. That's dangerous. It's dangerous to act like the white man. Now, I want to be perfectly clear on this. Why is it dangerous to act like the white man? This gets said again and again. Students repeatedly tell me things like, it's dangerous because the white man might see it and they'll get offended and they'll hurt them, or they'll take away privileges or something. That's not what they're talking about here. That's not the dangerous thing. The dangerous thing is twofold. One, you're going to offend someone because you're talking to them as though they need some white man to tell them what to do. And two, you're going to be taken as believing those things that you're saying when you're speaking as a white man. So you're going to be seen as being responsible for those words. So I remember a situation when I was a kid. I remember I had a little sister who was 13 months younger than me, and we were always going at it back and forth. And I remember one time she swore. I was probably 5 years old, probably she's like 4 or 5. And I remember telling my mom, Barb swore. She said a bad word. She was mad and she swore. And my mom said, well, what did she say? And I said, I can't say. She swore. That's a bad word. And I still remember this discussion with my mom where she's saying, it's okay if you tell me because you're not saying it, you're just telling me what she said. And I'm saying, but I can't say it, I'll get in trouble, you'll send me to my room. And Mom says, I'm not going to send you to your room. If you tell me what she's saying, then it's okay. And I was, of course, at 5 years old, having a difficult time processing this notion that the words that came out of my mouth sometimes counted and sometimes didn't count. That I was sometimes accountable for them and sometimes not. We see the same thing today a lot of times. I've seen this. I've got 3 daughters who, as they went through their teenage years, they and their friends would variously say things to or about other people that were really heartless sometimes, and then follow it up by just kidding or JK, right? And then the implication there is sort of, hey, I said that really mean thing to you, but I said just kidding, so I'm not responsible for it. If you're going to get offended, that's your problem. Even though I said that I think you're rude and ugly and you wear ugly clothes and no one should ever be your friend. Just kidding. And now if you get offended by that, it's not your responsibility. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about here in the Basso book. Okay? They're taking a secondary context, they're bringing it into play, the little girl takes on the role, the man starts talking about, this whatever story that he's telling, and he's acting like a white man, and you run the risk of losing that frame where people say, yes, this is a joking imitation. No, he's not responsible for the things he's saying. In fact, he's saying we shouldn't be like this. And you run the risk that perhaps people will think that you believe it, that you have sort of gone over to the white man's side, and that you don't belong as an Apache. So that's one of the dangers. Again, the other danger is that people are going to take this as a personal affront. They're going to see it as an attack on them, and they're going to not maintain the joking frame. They're going to see it as something more significant to that. There are a lot of more really important points in this text. I hope that you spend enough time with it to sort of get a feel for what it is, to see how the language use in the community is really important. So I want to emphasize this finally, and that is that the words that the people are saying in these joking imitations are not representative of what they believe. It's not the referential content of what they say is not the meaning that's important. The meaning that's important is that this is not how we behave. This is not who we are. Someone else does this. Okay, now some of you may be feeling a little bit of white guilt after reading this book, and I'll bet some of you did when you read this. You're like, oh, well, I feel kind of bad because we are kind of like that. Remember, this is a clash of cultures, and it goes both ways. Everybody's sort of guilty about it if we fail to see that, what we're doing, the way we interpret another person's culture, if we look at it and say, well, that can't be right, that's a wrong way, then yeah, we're all guilty of that. But this has a name, it's ethnocentrism, and if you'll recall from the first week of the semester, I told you that this is a universal phenomenon, and it is. We all evaluate other people based on our culture. The difference is what we do with that. If we recognize that's what's happening, and then we look at it, and we can look and say, okay, in that cultural context, what could that mean? And we don't just say, well, that's dumb, because that's not the way I look at it is the only right way to do it. Then we're going to be okay there. But if we do look at it and we say, well, that's just dumb, you don't understand, they don't understand, they're too dumb to understand, and so they're doing it wrong, now we're going to get ourselves into trouble, and we'll continue to have trouble. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for that text. I look forward to the discussion on this, and we will talk to you next time.